this is your second film.
Yep.
And why did you decide to do an adaptation following your first work?
I discovered Murakami through Takashi Miike directed Audition, and Audition is based on a book by Murakami, and that's how I discovered the author. I read Piercing and I loved it, and I found a lot of elements to it that I really thought it would be interesting to explore, and I saw an opportunity to do something very, very different than my first movie, and so I was intrigued by the idea of kind of like finding a story that I related to, but not something that I had generated, and figuring out how to kind of take the source material, make it my own, but still try to stay true to what the heart of it was.
And why do you think it was the heart of? I haven't really read the novel, but
at the heart of the book, it's this. It's sort of first and foremost a take on American sexy thrillers. Like in the book, he's very open. He's very self-awarely poking at Basic Instinct and that sort of movie. But beneath that, it's about these like two deeply damaged people that think they want to do harm, that actually don't, and they kind of find this weird, twisted love between each other and this connection. And so it's kind of like a fucked up love story, you know? And it's... so that was really the heart of the book for me, these two damaged people finding each other. And stylistically, I put my own spin on it. But yeah, that's kind of what the starting place was.
I think any movie that it starts with a father trying to kill his baby, it's kind of like it really grabs you from the beginning.
Yes.
So that scene came from the novel, or in that sense, how do you manage to make your own stuff and so forth?
That is the opening of the novel as well. I think that why it's so grabbing is, as a father, as a parent, you're supposed to, or we think you're supposed to have this like unconditional love for your child, but being a father is not necessarily as easy as you may have thought it would be, and you can't necessarily, or the character in the story can't necessarily like rid himself of these dark thoughts that he's having. And to see someone who's supposed to be like the ultimate protector be the person who's potentially endangering the child is, I think, super fascinating, but it's also like a really strong drive to want to figure out a way to get rid of that. The character too knows that it's dark and doesn't want that feeling. And so the story is really about this guy trying to rid himself of these thoughts by not the best means. He's planning another murder, but at least it's not his kid.
And at the same time, it's funny because exactly from the beginning with the voice of the baby and so forth. I think in the tone, it's kind of like reminding me of American Psycho.
Totally.
How do you balance that tone with something as like a psycho?
I think that that's part of what the fun of the whole movie was to try to make this really dark, twisted story feel more playful and more fun, with a weird sense of humor. I think that part of it's baked into the book. The book has a very bizarre sense of humor, but I look at a lot of like Chan-wook Park's films, or Bong Joon-ho, or Takashi Miike, who have these like jet black sense of humor. Like you could be watching the most horrific thing ever and still have a smile on your face because there's this twinge of playfulness. And I think a lot of Asian cinema, particularly in the genre space, does awesome kind of genre bending things like that, and juxtaposing feelings and emotions that shouldn't necessarily go together for an awesome effect. And so I was very inspired by those filmmakers that I just mentioned, and to try to play with that tone.
Right. And then, the film is basically dependent on the actors. It's very few locations and only 2 actors, so how challenging was to find the right people to play this?
I think that it's always a gamble, especially on an indie movie. You don't have a lot of time. You don't have time to rehearse. Chris was a friend of mine who, Chris plays Reed, and he was someone who I've seen him do a lot of similar sort of things in terms of he often is cast in very naturalistic movies. He's often cast as this kind of blue-collar, ordinary guy. And I wanted to give him something that was not that, and something that was totally different, and let him kind of, show that he's more than what he's used to being cast as. But also, in having a personal relationship with him and having so much of the movie be about him, be with him. He's on camera all the time. I knew that I would be able to get certain things out of him, and we'd be able to do certain things together. With Mia, she came into the project not very long before we were shooting, and I'm just such a fan of her work and think that she's a great actress. And she, in every movie that she's in, she brings so much tone to the whole piece. Like she has a style so unique that it imbues the whole film with her tone. And the last bit is hoping that the 2 of them will work together. The 2 of them on their own are great, and hoping that they'll have chemistry. And I think at that point it's just kind of luck, and we were lucky that they were great together. They really got along, and they felt they connected immediately, and were able to kind of complement each other so nicely.
And what's the greatest challenge to keep it a film so interesting with very few elements? Because it is really, I would say, a minimalist film in that sense.
I think that it's really about knowing how long you can sustain one thing for, and switching to a new energy as soon as you can't sustain it. I think that, there's so few locations, so few characters, but the kind of psychology is changing so rapidly, and the movie asks a lot of the audience in terms of trying to keep up and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that having it be engaging like that keeps the audience interested, keeps them guessing, keeps them on their toes. And before you get bored, we kind of turn in another direction and do something new with it. And I think that it's a testament to the actors that you're happy to spend that much time with them, because in most movies you don't have to spend that much time with them.
And you already talked a little bit about the male character, but what about the female character who is like this masochistic or this?
I think the fun of Mia's character is in most movies like this, these sort of like psychosexual thrillers, the female character is there to be a damsel in distress, there to be naked, or there to be killed in a really brutal way. And this movie sets up, here's a guy who wants to kill a prostitute. So you think the movie is going to deliver all those things, but it so doesn't. And the beauty of the character is that she doesn't let herself be any of those tropes. She doesn't let herself be a damsel in distress, get killed, be taken advantage of. She really is the one with all the power, the one that's playing all the mind games. And I think kind of the most fun aspect of this movie is you start off and the audience has a very set expectation of where this movie's gonna go. And because of this character, because of Jackie, she totally tells you, don't expect anything because you don't know what I'm capable of. You don't know what I'm going to do. And I think that kind of upending the kind of female role in this sort of movie was something that was important and interesting to me.
And finally, were there any particular challenges when adapting something that's from another culture, in this case Japanese?
Yeah, I think that it's part of the reason why I sort of like set the movie in an unknown city at an unknown time. I think that particularly with some of the things having to do with prostitution is handled so differently in Japan, handled differently in America, handled differently in Europe, and every country handles things like that differently. And I didn't find that stigma or connotation was important in the book. It was more about who these people are and why they're here together. And so, you know, I think in an attempt to kind of pull sort of cultural associations out of it, I took out the time and the place, and you have no idea when or where it is, so you don't have any of that sort of stigma to latch on to.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you.